Hello, everybody. Um, it's been a while since I did a live video. My name is Alex Plaxen. Obviously, if you're watching this, you're probably friends with me. But in case you're not, I am the VP of Experience Strategy for Nifty Method Marketing and Events in the events industry. And we've been hit pretty hard by the coronavirus. A lot of events being canceled, most events being canceled. But there's some bright spots. We've got events going virtual. For those who don't know, Global Meetings Industry Day is a global day on April 14th where most of the events industry had planned to meet face to face. And unfortunately, due to the outbreak, we're unable to do that. But a large group of us have come together and we've decided to take it virtual. And we're actually trying to break a world record for the most people on live streaming at once. So it's very exciting. We've got a lot of things planned. You can kind of see in the description a link to register for that. But today, what I wanted to do was actually kind of tell my story of why I fell in love with this industry. Um, it's not a story that I've gotten to share very often. But and in fact, most of, most of my friends in the industry probably don't even know. So I'm excited to share this story with you today, and I hope that you'll use the hashtag why I meet, and tell your story. Tell us why you fell in love with meetings and events, why you wanted to be a part of this industry. Um, I've been hosting the podcast Event Icons for the last 3 years, and I've heard a lot of stories of how about people got into the industry or fell into the industry as a career. But one thing we don't really ask is, what made you fall in love with it? What made you stay? And mine actually goes way back, long before I thought this was going to be part of my career. And for me, it was when I was, I must have been 14 years old. Um, I'm Jewish, and when I was 14, I believe, in eighth grade. So I was in eighth grade, and I joined an organization called the B'nai B'rith Youth Organization, also known as BBYO. And as an eighth grader, you were not supposed to be allowed to attend our regional convention because technically it was in over winter break, and you weren't supposed to be able to join as an eighth grader until the second half of the year. So eighth graders were not supposed to attend this event, and fortunately, I had gotten special permission because my chapter that I had been a part of only had graduating seniors the year before. So they let me join early, and because I was a member, I was able to attend our regional convention. This was the first time, besides summer camp, that I got to leave my home, and it was over Christmas, and hang out in a hotel with a bunch of other teenagers. It was really cool, a really fascinating experience as a 14-year-old to be attending my first conference. And what people don't know is that, yes, my sister was there, and that was great, and I had that kind of person to rely on. I did know some people there, but for the most part, I knew very few people. And it was extremely abnormal to be the only person from your chapter at the conference as well, especially as an eighth grader. So I was the only eighth grader, and I was really the only person who was there as the only person in my chapter. So the two things that really set me apart, and it was scary as hell. But I sat there at the opening, and I watched these teenagers get up on stage and deliver this address to hundreds of other Jewish teenagers. And to set the stage, this was a hotel in Ocean City, Maryland, which is a beach town. This is a hotel right on the beach over Christmas. So no one else was in Ocean City over Christmas. It was freezing out, and basically a bunch of Jewish teens took over the hotel. And this happened every year. And I watched these teens get up on stage and deliver this address to hundreds of other Jewish teens, and everyone was so excited to be there. Um, and it was eye opening. I had never experienced anything like this. Maybe at summer camp, but nothing quite like this, because not only was this for teenagers, but it was planned by teenagers. All the content, all the education, how to run your chapter, how to plan events for your chapter, things like that, that we experienced there, besides the fun networking hangout part, was all planned by the teenagers. And usually taught by the teenagers as well. We had advisors there. We weren't just a bunch of teenagers alone. We had chaperones, advisors, and staff. But for the most part, this was something that was planned by the teenagers. And these 6 teenagers got up on stage at the beginning and shared their experience. Most of them were seniors in high school. They were presidents of their councils. So I grew up in Maryland. We had Baltimore Council, DC Council, and Northern Virginia Council. And the male and female president of each council planned this event. So what was really cool was the event. These teenagers had been looking forward to this for a long time. And for the first time ever, I think it struck me that those teenagers up there on stage was what I wanted. Not for the glory of being up in front of a stage in front of a bunch of teenagers. That kind of frightened me a little bit. I mean, I was in theater, so I was used to getting up in front of people. But the idea that they had come together and created this experience for everyone else really excited me. But I don't think that was necessarily the moment that I fell in love with the event. Yes, it was cool and it was exciting to see that these teenagers had done this. But throughout that weekend, with these other teenagers around, I met people who changed my life. I met a group of guys who were I was in Baltimore Council and they were in DC Council. And they weren't a small chapter, but they were smaller than some of the bigger chapters. And these guys kind of took me under their wing. And at first it was kind of a joke that it was like this 8th grader who was there alone. But they kind of took me under their wing. I got to sit with them at meals. And they kind of made me feel like an honorary member of their chapter. Which was incredible for me, because that was not something I expected to happen. I did not expect to meet these guys who would inevitably change my life, because by the time that the convention ended, I had formed these bonds with these guys and these friendships that would last for many, many years. The last thing that happened at the convention before we all left, we had these things called olive pins. The B'nai B'rith Youth Organization is made up of 2 groups. The AZA, which is Aleph Zadik Aleph, Hebrew letters, is basically based on the Greek system, the fraternity system, and then B'nai B'rith Girls, BBG. And each one has a pin, and the guys in Aleph Zadik Aleph had an olive pin. It was a little lapel pin. And when you became a member, you got your pin. These guys from this chapter, about 5 of them, right before we were about to leave, the last morning that we were there, they came up to me and they said to me, because keep in mind, being an 8th grader as the only guy in your chapter, it was very unlikely that my chapter would continue to succeed. Most chapters in that position would eventually fold. They would no longer exist. Any members who wanted to continue being members would join another chapter. But there was a lot of history with my chapter. I didn't want to do that, but I didn't know really if I'd be motivated enough to not fold the chapter. And these guys came up to me, and these guys who had took me under their wing, and they each sat me down, and they made me promise to never fold the chapter. And for the promise, they each gave me their olive pin, which was a very emotional experience. I'm getting choked up thinking about it. Um, they gave me their olive pin and they said, promise that you'll never fold the chapter, that you will be successful, right? Um, and it was in that moment that I realized that had I not gone to this convention, this event, and bonded with these guys over the weekend, um, that exchange never would have happened. Um, I met these people that changed my life, because what ended up happening from that promise was I did not fold that chapter. Eventually, I did become president of Baltimore Council. I did revive my chapter in my senior year. For most of my time, I was a chapter of one. Um, and they they made it so that I would not fold, and I did become president of my chapter. And so my senior year, I actually got to plan regional convention, um, which was incredible. It was not the first convention I had planned. I had planned some leadership weekends and things like that in the youth group, but this was the big one, right? This was a regional convention. This was the thing I had waited 5 years to plan, and as I was planning it, my parents actually told me um, that they had decided over winter break that the family was going to go on a cruise. And it was the first cruise we had ever taken. We did not take many vacations. Um, and the dates of the cruise were over the same dates as regional convention that I had been planning. Now, there were 5 other people on the committee. They could have found a replacement for me, but I had a choice to make. I could either plan my convention, or I could go on the cruise, right? Um, so I decided to plan the convention. And I should have known at that time that the events industry was the industry that I had fallen in love with, and that I would end up being having my career in. Um, but I didn't know that. I ended up going to film school, and then I came back and got my master's degree in event meeting management. Um, but at the time, for me, that convention was so important to me, that planning, and I loved it so much. I really should have known. I don't think anyone had told me at the time, like, this is a career that you can have. Um, had I known, I definitely would have been like, oh yeah, that's what I should be going to school for. Um, but I got very active on the international level too. I went to an international leader training conference, where I met lifelong friends there. I also ended up being on the committee to plan international convention. So it was, being a member of that youth group was so important to my future as an event professional. And it was really that first conference that I got to go to as a 14-year-old kid, that made me fall in love with events and realize the power of what meeting face to face can do. Um, so that's my story. And I, hope that you will share yours as well. Um, that's my story of why I meet. I know the power of what these conferences and meetings can do in events, and I want to hear your stories. So please use the hashtag why I meet. Go live, tell your stories, tag me so I can watch them. But let's get this Global Meetings Industry Day goes virtual. Let's break that record of the most live streaming, people watching a live stream at once. I think that'll be really exciting, and I think it'll show everyone that this coronavirus, this crisis we're going through right now, is not going to stop us as an industry. We will survive this, and it's just going to take some time and some resilience, which I know this industry has. I have met so many amazing friends and professionals in this industry, colleagues, mentors. So I hope that you have, enjoyed the story. I want to hear yours now. So I challenge you to use the hashtag why I meet and tell me and the rest of the world why you fell in love with events and meetings. So that's it for me today. I look forward to hearing your stories, And that's it. Thanks for listening.